The relentless hum of the fluorescent lights in the cafeteria always seemed to amplify Alara Vance's solitude. She sat at a table near the back, a worn copy of 100 Years of Solitude propped open against her lunch tray. The book offered a sanctuary, a world where fantastical events unfolded with a quiet inevitability, a stark contrast to the mundane, often jarring realities of Northwood High. Around her, the cacophony of adolescent chatter ebbed and flowed, punctuated by sharp bursts of laughter, the clatter of cutlery, and the insistent clang of lockers. Alara, however, existed within her own soundproof bubble, observing the swirling vortex of social interactions with the detached curiosity of an anthropologist. She watched the popular girls cluster at the sunlit tables by the windows, their voices bright and unburdened, their movements fluid and confident. She saw the jocks, loud and boisterous, challenging each other to impromptu arm wrestling contests. And she saw the quiet cliques, each carved out their own territory, their conversations hushed and intimate. For Alara, these were not just classmates, they were characters in a play she was perpetually observing, never quite joining. Her lunch, a lukewarm hot dog nestled in a too-soft bun, a handful of soggy fries, and a carton of milk remained largely untouched. The smell of overcooked vegetables and processed meat hung heavy in the air, a familiar scent of institutional neutrality that perfectly mirrored her emotional state. She wasn't unhappy. Not precisely. Loneliness, to Alara, wasn't an absence, but a presence, a quiet companion that had accompanied her since she was old enough to discern the subtle differences in accents, the unspoken rules of social circles. Her parents, immigrants who had arrived in the United States with little more than hope and a fierce determination, had instilled in her a deep appreciation for language, not just as a tool for communication, but as a living bridge between cultures. Yet, in the hallways of Northwood, her slightly unusual cadence, a subtle blend of her parents' native tongue and American English, often felt less like a bridge and more like a barrier. It set her apart, marking her as different, an outsider in a world that prized effortless belonging. Her home, a small, meticulously kept house on the quieter side of town, offered a different kind of quiet. There, the air hummed with the gentle murmur of her parents' conversations in their native language, the rhythmic sizzle of her mother's cooking, and the occasional burst of laughter from a television show playing in their ancestral tongue. These were sounds of comfort, of belonging, yet they also served as a constant reminder of the cultural tightrope Alara walked daily. At school, she consciously softened her pronunciation, tried to mimic the flat, uninflected tones of her American peers, desperate to blend in, to erase the subtle musicality that marked her as foreign. But at home, her tongue would loosen, her sentences would flow with the cadences of her heritage, a language that felt like warm silk against her skin. It was a paradox that left her perpetually hovering between two worlds, fully inhabiting neither. One particularly bustling lunch period, the cafeteria seemed even more chaotic than usual. A new student, clearly overwhelmed, stood by the serving line, clutching a crumpled piece of paper, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and panic. She was clearly an international student, her traditional attire and hesitant movements marking her as unmistakably new. The cafeteria staff, harried and impatient, gestured vaguely, their English too fast, too clipped for the newcomer to grasp. The new student's shoulders slumped, a silent plea for help etched on her face. A small knot of popular students nearby giggled, pointing discreetly. Alara, observing from her quiet corner, felt a familiar ache in her chest. She remembered her own first days, the silent struggle to decode 1,000 unspoken rules, the fear of misunderstanding, of making a fool of herself. A wave of unexpected courage, a tiny ripple in her usual ocean of shyness, propelled her forward. She slipped out of her seat, leaving her untouched lunch, and approached the bewildered student. The girl's eyes, dark and expressive, darted towards Alara, filled with a desperate hope. "Hello," Alara murmured, her voice soft, using a few simple, carefully chosen words in what she recognized as the girl's native tongue. She had picked up snippets from conversations with her parents' friends and through her grandmother's old travel documentaries. The words were a little rusty, a little hesitant, but they were spoken with genuine empathy. A flicker of recognition, then profound relief, washed over the new student's face. Her rigid posture softened. "Hello," the girl replied, her voice a fragile whisper of gratitude. "What would you like to eat?" Alara asked, slowly, carefully, enunciating each word as best as she could recall. She pointed to different items on the menu board, translating the basic options. The girl, whose name Alara learned was Lynn, pointed to a simple salad and a bottle of water. Alara helped her navigate the ordering process, explaining the steps in simple, basic phrases, her gestures filling in the gaps. It wasn't a fluent conversation, not by any stretch, but it was enough. It was a bridge. As Lynn finally received her tray and offered Alara a small, grateful smile, a flicker of warmth, unfamiliar yet comforting, spread through Alara's chest. She didn't linger for thanks or recognition. She simply returned to her lonely table, the small act of kindness a quiet balm to her own solitude. No one else seemed to have noticed, and that suited Alara just fine. Beyond her textbooks and the bustling school environment, Alara harbored a quiet, almost secret fascination with languages. It wasn't the academic, grammatical dissection of language that captivated her, but its living, breathing essence. Since childhood, she had carried a small, intricately carved wooden bird, a gift from her late grandmother. The bird, smoothed by years of handling, felt cool and comforting in her palm. But it was the unfamiliar, swirling symbols etched into its base that truly intrigued her. They weren't letters, not in any alphabet she recognized, but flowing lines and curves that seemed to dance across the wood. Her grandmother, a woman whose eyes held the wisdom of forgotten tales and whose voice was a melody of ancient proverbs, had always encouraged her to listen to the whispers of the wind, for they carry forgotten tongues. Alara had never fully understood what her grandmother meant, but she felt a strange connection to those symbols, as if they held a secret language only she could intuit. In the margins of her school notebooks, nestled between diligently taken notes on American history and algebra equations, Alara often found herself scribbling strange word pairings and phonetic symbols that bore no resemblance to her schoolwork. These weren't attempts to learn new languages in the traditional sense. Instead, it was an intuitive, almost instinctive process. She would hear a snippet of a foreign song, a stray phrase from a documentary, or even just the unique intonation of a stranger's voice, and her mind would begin to dissect it, to break it down into its fundamental sounds, to search for patterns and connections. She'd create her own crude phonetic alphabet to capture these elusive sounds, drawing lines and curves that, eerily, sometimes mirrored the symbols on her wooden bird. She felt a profound, almost spiritual connection to the act of deciphering, of finding meaning in the seemingly random. The omniscient narrator could reveal her internal thoughts about this peculiar habit. She wasn't consciously trying to learn a language. Rather, it was as if the languages themselves were speaking to her, revealing their hidden logic. The symbols on the bird felt alive in her hands, she would often think, tracing their contours. Unlike the dead letters in her textbooks, these held a secret, vibrating energy. She harbored no grand ambitions for this talent. It was simply a part of her, a quiet, almost meditative practice that brought her a strange sense of contentment. She never shared this peculiar hobby with anyone, not even her parents. It was her private world, a sanctuary where her mind could wander freely, unburdened by the expectations of standardized tests or the judgments of her peers. She understood, in her own quiet way, that words were more than just tools. They were reflections of history, culture, and the human spirit. And within her, dormant yet potent, lay an extraordinary gift for unlocking their deepest secrets. Her life was a tapestry woven with threads of quiet observation, introverted study, and a burgeoning, unacknowledged talent. She navigated the labyrinthine corridors of Northwood High with a practiced invisibility, her backpack heavy with textbooks and notebooks filled with strange, beautiful scripts, the metallic taste of cafeteria food, the distant echoes of teenage laughter, the subtle hum of the fluorescent lights. These were the constant companions of her days. Yet, beneath this veneer of ordinary quietude, a different energy thrummed. She felt the subtle vibrations of different languages, even those she didn't formally know, as if the world was a vast orchestra and she possessed a unique ability to hear every instrument, every subtle note. Sometimes, after school, instead of going straight home, she would wander through the local public library. It was an older building, its air thick with the scent of aged paper and quiet contemplation. She found solace among the towering shelves, losing herself in books that explored diverse cultures, ancient civilizations, and, most frequently, the origins and evolution of languages. While other students might gravitate towards fiction or pop culture magazines, Alara was drawn to dusty tomes on linguistics, forgotten dialects, and the intricate etymology of words. She found a strange comfort in understanding how words, like living organisms, changed and adapted over centuries, carrying with them the echoes of past societies. She often wondered if the symbols on her wooden bird were whispers from such a forgotten tongue, a legacy passed down through generations. Her solitude wasn't a burden, but a choice, a necessary condition for her unique form of deep listening and observation. It allowed her to perceive the world in nuanced shades, to notice the subtle inflections in a person's voice that spoke more than their words, to discern the unsaid in the silence between sentences. This quiet intensity, however, made her an easy target for those who preferred the loud and the obvious. She was a silent, unassuming presence, and in a high school environment often ruled by the boisterous and the confident, her quietude could be mistaken for weakness. But within that stillness lay a formidable intellectual curiosity and a burgeoning talent that was far grander than anyone, including Alara herself, truly understood. The teachers at Northwood generally overlooked Alara. She was a good student, never caused trouble, and consistently turned in her assignments on time. She was simply quiet. Her grades were respectable, though not exceptional, as she often found the rigid structures of standardized tests limiting for her unconventional way of thinking. Her essays, while grammatically correct, sometimes lacked the flashy rhetoric that impressed certain teachers, especially those who valued performative confidence over genuine insight. Her English teacher, Mr. Harrison, was one such individual. He prided himself on his command of the Queen's English, a self-proclaimed connoisseur of proper diction and eloquent pronunciation. He saw language as a fixed, unyielding entity, a set of rules to be meticulously followed rather than a fluid, evolving tapestry. And for him, any deviation from these rigid rules, especially an accent, was a mark of imperfection, a blight on the pristine landscape of correct English. He held a particular disdain for those who spoke with what he condescendingly referred to as a broken accent, viewing it as a sign of intellectual deficiency rather than a testament to multilingualism. He often scoffed internally at immigrant students, believing they lacked the necessary finesse to truly master the English language, despite their often superior grasp of grammar and vocabulary. His gaze, when it fell upon Alara, often held a dismissive glint, a silent judgment of her quietness and the faint, almost imperceptible lilt in her otherwise impeccable English. He saw her as another one of them, someone who would never truly belong to the world he deemed superior. Despite these subtle challenges, Alara clung to the small rituals that brought her comfort, the scent of her grandmother's dried herbs from a small pouch she kept in her backpack, the smooth, cool feel of the wooden bird in her pocket, the quiet satisfaction of decoding a complex phrase in one of her linguistic texts. These were the anchors in her largely solitary existence, the quiet constants that reminded her of who she was, even when the world around her seemed determined to make her feel invisible. She knew, deep down, that her path was different, that her understanding of the world ran deeper than the superficial currents of high school popularity. But she had yet to truly understand the immense power that lay dormant within her, waiting for the right catalyst to awaken. The storm was brewing, and it would soon shatter the quiet solitude she had grown to know, forcing her to confront not only her fears, but also the prejudice of those who sought to diminish her. Her grandmother's whispers about forgotten tongues would soon take on a new, urgent meaning. The morning sun, usually a welcome golden embrace, felt like a harsh spotlight on the day Alara Vance's world began to fracture. She walked to school with her usual measured steps, the familiar weight of her backpack a comforting presence. Yet, an invisible hum of anxiety vibrated beneath her calm exterior. Today was public speaking day in Mr. Harrison's English class, a dreaded ritual that sent shivers down her spine. Mr. Harrison, with his perfectly coiffed silver hair and a perpetual air of self-importance, was a stickler for what he deemed proper English. His classroom, usually a sterile landscape of textbooks and polished desks, transformed into a stage of judgment during these assignments. He often referred to himself as the custodian of clarity and seemed to derive a particular, almost perverse, pleasure from dissecting every grammatical misstep and every subtle deviation from what he considered the quintessential American accent. He viewed language not as a vibrant, evolving entity, but as a rigid structure, a fortress to be defended against the barbaric incursions of foreign inflections. As Alara took her seat, she observed Mr. Harrison surveying the classroom. His eyes, sharp and assessing, lingered for a fraction of a second too long on students like Alara, those who carried the faint echoes of another language in their speech. He saw their accents not as a testament to their multilingualism, but as a flaw, a visible crack in their mastery of English. His internal monologue, unseen by anyone but known to the omniscient narrator, was a stream of disdainful thoughts. Another one of them trying to stumble through Shakespeare. Why can't they just speak properly? It's not that difficult. Clarity. Precision. These are the pillars of a civilized tongue. Not this mangled approximation. He prided himself on his ears for nuance, but in reality, his ears were only tuned to detect and amplify what he considered imperfections in others, especially those from backgrounds different from his own. When her turn came, Alara approached the podium, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She had chosen to present on the historical significance of ancient trade routes, a topic that genuinely fascinated her. Her research was meticulous, her points well-structured, and her content insightful. She began to speak, her voice initially a soft murmur, then gaining a steady rhythm as she delved into her subject. She consciously tried to neutralize her accent, to flatten the subtle lilt that was an intrinsic part of her linguistic identity. She focused on her breathing, on enunciating each word with careful precision, desperate to avoid Mr. Harrison's critical gaze. She could feel the subtle shifts in her own tongue, the slight tension as she tried to force out the ingrained sounds of her upbringing. She spoke of caravans laden with spices, of cultural exchange across vast deserts, of the intricate tapestry of human connection woven through commerce. Her words painted a vivid picture for those who truly listened. But Mr. Harrison was not listening for meaning. He was listening for flaws. Suddenly, he interrupted her. His voice, usually smooth and modulated, was tinged with an almost theatrical condescension. He held up a hand, a slight smirk playing on his lips. Alara, if you could just pause for a moment. Alara's voice died in her throat. A cold dread seeped into her bones. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, a telltale sign of her mortification. Mr. Harrison chuckled, a dry, grating sound that seemed to echo through the silent classroom. He then proceeded to mimic her pronunciation, exaggerating the slight rolling of her R's and the soft vowel sounds that were remnants of her parents' native tongue. He drew out the sounds, making them sound clumsy, almost grotesque. "Elara," he sneered, his voice dripping with false concern. "Your pronunciation, it's quite unique, almost charmingly broken. Perhaps stick to simpler words until you master the Queen's English, or at least standard American." He paused, letting his words hang in the air, a cruel silence amplifying their sting. "After all," he continued, turning to address the class, a knowing look on his face, "clarity is paramount, isn't it? One wouldn't want to accidentally offend a foreign dignitary. Would one best to learn proper speech now, rather than later?" A few nervous titters rippled through the class. Some students glanced at Elara with pity, others with awkward amusement, while a few avoided her gaze entirely. The laughter, whether genuine or forced, pierced her heart like shards of ice. Alara's face flushed a fiery red, her vision blurred with unshed tears. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the polished linoleum floor beneath her feet. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on her, suffocating her. Her meticulously researched presentation, her carefully chosen words, all dissolved into a haze of shame. Her voice trembled as she tried to force out an apology, but no words came. It felt as if her throat had constricted, betraying her. The incident was not just a public shaming, it was a profound invalidation of her identity. Mr. Harrison's words struck at the very core of who Elara was, a bridge between cultures, a silent observer of linguistic nuances. He had not merely criticized her pronunciation, he had mocked her heritage, her parents' efforts, and the very essence of her being. The memory of her grandmother's whispers about forgotten tongues felt distant, mocked by the harsh reality of Mr. Harrison's classroom. Elara felt a deep sense of injustice, not just for herself, but for the countless others who had been silenced, belittled, and made to feel ashamed of their origins. This public humiliation, however, also ignited a quiet spark of defiance within her. It was a slow burn, not an explosive rage, but a steady, simmering fire of resolve. The omniscient narrator could see into her deepest thoughts. He thinks I am broken. He thinks my language is broken. But he does not understand. He does not understand what strength lies in the whispers of forgotten tongues. What power resides in the ability to bridge worlds he cannot even fathom. Her internal struggle was palpable, the overwhelming urge to flee, to hide, to never speak in front of a class again, warring with a nascent, powerful desire to prove him wrong. Not just to prove him wrong, but to shatter his rigid, prejudiced worldview. Mr. Harrison, emboldened by the class's nervous laughter and Elara's visible distress, continued to belittle her linguistic abilities throughout the remainder of the class. He assigned her extra pronunciation drills that felt less like academic exercises and more like outright punishment. "Elara, I want you to spend an hour every evening in the language lab, focusing solely on standard American phonetics. No more of that delightful lilt. We must strive for clarity. Mustn't we?" he announced, his tone sweet but venomous. He seemed to relish her discomfort, a cruel satisfaction playing on his features. This ongoing targeting, this public and personal assault on her self-worth, made it impossible for Elara to retreat into her quiet shell. She could not simply ignore it. Her dignity, her academic standing, and her very sense of self were at stake. The fear of public speaking, once a general anxiety, transformed into a burning desire to silence her oppressor, to show him the true power of words and the profound blindness of his own prejudice. The incident resonated deeply within the school. Whispers followed Alara through the hallways. Some students, the more empathetic ones, offered small, sympathetic glances, but most averted their eyes, uncomfortable witnesses to her humiliation. The more popular students, those who often followed Mr. Harrison's unspoken cues, gave her a wider berth, their faces holding a mixture of awkwardness and a subtle sense of superiority. Alara felt more isolated than ever, her quiet world shattered by the harsh glare of public ridicule. That evening, at home, Alara tried to hide her distress from her parents. She ate her dinner quietly, picking at her food. Her mother, whose keen eyes missed nothing, noticed her daughter's unusual silence. "Alara, is something wrong?" she asked in their native tongue, her voice filled with gentle concern. Alara hesitated, then shook her head. "No, Mom. Just a long day." She couldn't bring herself to explain the humiliation, the sting of Mr. Harrison's words. She knew her parents had faced similar, if not worse, prejudices when they first arrived in this country. She didn't want to add to their burdens. But as she spoke, she unconsciously clutched the small wooden bird in her pocket, its smooth surface a familiar comfort. The symbols on its base seemed to pulse faintly under her fingertips, a silent reassurance. Later that night, Alara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The words of Mr. Harrison replayed in her mind like a broken record, each syllable a fresh cut. Broken, unique, mangle. But then, another voice, soft and echoing from the past, interjected. Her grandmother's voice. "Listen to the whispers of the wind, for they carry forgotten tongues. Strength is found in the unseen." Alara closed her eyes. She imagined the wind, not a harsh, mocking gust, but a gentle breeze carrying a multitude of voices, each unique, each beautiful in its own right. She pictured her grandmother's knowing smile, her eyes twinkling with ancient wisdom. A fierce resolve began to solidify within Alara. She would not let Mr. Harrison's prejudice define her. She would not let his narrow-mindedness extinguish the light of her heritage. Instead, she would harness the very thing he ridiculed, her unique linguistic sensibility, and turn it into her greatest strength. This incident, this humiliation, was the point of no return. She could not go back to being the invisible girl. She could not simply endure. She had to fight. She had to learn. She had to prove, not just to Mr. Harrison, but to herself, that her broken accent was, in fact, a testament to a profound and powerful gift. The quiet before the storm was over. The catalyst had struck, and Alara Vance, the unassuming, quiet student, was about to embark on a journey that would reveal depths she herself had barely glimpsed. She rose from her bed, her movements purposeful. She walked to her desk, retrieved her notebooks, and carefully opened the one filled with her cryptic scribbles of phonetic symbols and strange word pairings. Underneath the fluorescent glow of her desk lamp, she began to meticulously transcribe the foreign sounds she had heard Lynn, the new student, speak in the cafeteria earlier that day. Her mind, no longer clouded by shame, felt clear and focused. It was as if her senses had been heightened, allowing her to perceive the intricate dance of syllables and intonations with startling clarity. This wasn't just homework. This was her silent rebellion, her clandestine training for a battle she knew was coming. The battle would not be fought with fists or shouting, but with words, with understanding, with the very power of communication that Mr. Harrison so arrogantly claimed to master. And Alara, with her broken accent, would be the unlikely warrior. The sting of Mr. Harrison's mockery lingered like a phantom ache, a constant reminder of the public humiliation. Alara found herself grappling with an internal conflict, the deeply ingrained desire to retreat into her familiar shell of quiet anonymity, warring with the fierce spark of defiance ignited by his prejudice. She knew, intellectually, that her unique accent was a testament to her rich heritage, a beautiful blend of cultures. Yet, the emotional impact of his words had chipped away at her confidence, making her self-conscious of every syllable she uttered. She tried harder in her English classes, practicing pronunciation drills with a grim determination, hoping to erase the broken parts of her speech that Mr. Harrison seemed to detest so much. But even as she tried to conform, a part of her resisted, unwilling to surrender the very essence of her linguistic identity. Her retreat wasn't into silence, but into deeper study. The school library became her second home. While her classmates socialized or crammed for tests, Ilara burrowed into the labyrinthine stacks, her fingers tracing the spines of books on subjects far beyond her curriculum. She devoured texts on advanced linguistics, not just the dry academic theories, but the living history of languages, their evolution, their intricate structures. She became fascinated by etymology, tracing the lineage of words across continents and centuries, uncovering the hidden stories embedded within their sounds. She even sought out obscure foreign language dictionaries, not to learn specific phrases, but to understand the fundamental building blocks of unfamiliar tongues. It was an obsessive pursuit, fueled by a nascent understanding that the keys to defying Mr. Harrison, and perhaps even understanding herself, lay in these forgotten corners of knowledge. The small, intricately carved wooden bird, her grandmother's gift, became her constant companion, its cool, smooth surface often pressed against her thumb as she pondered complex linguistic puzzles. The symbols etched on its base seemed to hum with a silent energy, guiding her, whispering to her about connections she couldn't yet articulate. It was during one of these solitary expeditions that she truly met Ms. Anya Sharma, the school's librarian. Ms. Sharma was a woman of quiet demeanor but sharp intellect, with eyes that seemed to hold a vast reservoir of untold stories. She had noticed Ilara before, the way the quiet student would drift through the less frequented sections of the library, the unusual titles she checked out, the intensity with which she read. Unlike Mr. Harrison, Ms. Sharma saw curiosity, not deficiency. She saw a mind that thirsted for knowledge beyond the conventional. One afternoon, as Ilara was meticulously cross-referencing an ancient text on Proto-Indo-European languages with a modern dictionary of obscure dialects, Ms. Sharma approached her. An ambitious read. Ilara, Ms. Sharma said, her voice soft, a hint of genuine interest in her tone. Most students stick to Shakespeare or the latest YA fantasy. Ilara looked up, startled, a blush creeping up her neck. Oh, I find languages fascinating, especially how they connect across time. Ms. Sharma smiled, a warm, knowing smile that reached her eyes. Indeed, they are living things, aren't they? Not just static rules. She paused, then gestured to the open book on Ilara's desk. And these symbols, they look quite familiar. A dialect from the Himalayan foothills, perhaps, or a very ancient script from Southeast Asia. Ms. Sharma's casual observation sent a jolt through Ilara. No one had ever recognized the nature of her studies, let alone hinted at a knowledge of such esoteric scripts. Ilara stared at the symbols on the page, then at the wooden bird in her pocket, the connection between them suddenly feeling more potent. My grandmother had a saying, Ilara confessed, her voice barely a whisper. She said, "Listen to the whispers of the wind, for they carry forgotten tongues." Ms. Sharma's eyes softened further. A wise woman. Your grandmother. Language is far more than just what we speak. Ilara, it's woven into the fabric of who we are. From that day on, a silent understanding formed between them. Ms. Sharma subtly encouraged Ilara, often leaving new, intriguing books on linguistics or anthropology on her usual table, or pointing her towards online archives of rare dialects. She became a quiet mentor, the first person to truly glimpse Ilara's extraordinary aptitude for languages, though even she couldn't yet fully comprehend the depth of Ilara's intuitive grasp. She saw a flicker of something truly remarkable, something beyond academic learning, a raw, untamed talent. The true unveiling of Ilara's talent, however, happened in a moment of pure, unexpected crisis. Northwood High had recently welcomed a new exchange student, a timid girl named Anya, no relation to Ms. Sharma, who hailed from a remote region of Central Asia. Her native language was an incredibly rare, ancient dialect, spoken by only a few thousand people. Despite the school's best efforts, no one, not the foreign language teachers, not the online translation tools, not even the local community's diverse population could effectively communicate with her. Anya was increasingly distressed, isolated by a wall of incomprehension. She would wander the hallways with wide, frightened eyes, her shoulders hunched, unable to convey even the simplest needs. Her isolation was a palpable thing, a heavy cloak she wore constantly. One Tuesday morning, during a bustling homeroom period, Anya collapsed. Not from physical illness, but from sheer emotional exhaustion and dehydration. She was barely conscious, mumbling incoherently in her native tongue, her words a frantic stream of fear and pain. The school nurse, a stern but well-meaning woman, tried to ask her what was wrong, but Anya's words were gibberish to her. Panic rippled through the room. Teachers hurried in, their faces etched with concern, but none could breach the linguistic barrier. Mr. Harrison, as head of the English department, was among them, his usual composure rattled by the unexpected crisis. He tried speaking slowly, loudly, as if volume alone could make English intelligible to a distressed, non-English speaker. It was a futile effort. Ilara, who happened to be in the adjacent classroom, heard the commotion. Drawn by the rising anxiety, she peered through the open door, her eyes immediately fixated on Anya, seeing not just a collapsed student, but a mirror of her own past isolation, amplified to a terrifying degree. A powerful surge of empathy, a primal urge to help, propelled her forward. She slipped into the crowded doorway, unnoticed by the flustered teachers. She began to listen. Anya's frantic mumblings, incomprehensible to others, began to form a mosaic of sounds in Ilara's mind. The rhythmic patterns, the distinct vocalizations, the subtle shifts in tone. They resonated with the phonetic scribbles in her notebook, with the whispers of her grandmother's voice, with the symbols on her wooden bird that seemed to hum in her pocket. It was as if a hidden mechanism within her had suddenly clicked into place. Slowly, carefully, Ilara stepped into the room. Her voice, though still soft, cut through the anxious murmuring of the adults. She's saying her head hurts, very badly, and that she feels very thirsty. She needs water. Ilara's words were hesitant, her accent still present, but the translation was clear, precise, immediate. She wasn't just guessing, she was truly understanding. The school nurse immediately fetched water, offering it to Anya, who eagerly drank. The mere act of being understood, even through Ilara's seemingly broken interpretation, brought a visible wave of relief over Anya's face. She murmured more words, her gaze fixed on Ilara, as if she had found an unexpected lifeline in a sea of foreignness. Ilara, in turn, listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. She translated Anya's further explanations, a headache that had been worsening for days, a fear of being misunderstood, a desperate need for a specific kind of medication she had left at her host family's house. This quiet, yet profound, act of translation was witnessed by Ms. Sharma, who had also rushed to the scene, her eyes widening with a mixture of awe and recognition. She had seen glimpses of Ilara's aptitude before, but this was on a different scale entirely. And then there was Mr. Harrison. He stood frozen, utterly flabbergasted. He watched as Ilara, the student he had publicly ridiculed for her unique accent, effortlessly communicated with a foreign student speaking a dialect so obscure it baffled every other adult in the room. The very accent he had mocked now seemed to be the key, allowing her to mimic Anya's intonation and rhythm with uncanny accuracy, bridging the gap where others had failed. His face, usually a mask of haughty confidence, was now a portrait of shock, then disbelief, quickly morphing into a simmering jealousy and resentment. He felt a cold dread creep up his spine. His carefully constructed worldview, where he was the undisputed authority on proper English and its correct usage, was crumbling before his eyes. He saw a talent he never imagined, a talent that directly contradicted his earlier dismissal of her. It was a challenge to his authority, an undeniable refutation of his prejudices. After Anya was stable and being attended to, Mr. Harrison quickly regained his composure, albeit a fragile one. His shock solidified into a cunning resolve. He approached the principal, who had arrived on the scene, and subtly began to dismiss Alara's luck. Remarkable coincidence, isn't it? Principal Thompson. The girl just happens to know a few phrases from some obscure tongue. Probably picked it up from an online translator. Nothing truly exceptional. Certainly not indicative of any profound linguistic ability. He smiled thinly, a transparent attempt to undermine what he had just witnessed. Perhaps Alara simply has a knack for mimicry. Nothing more. We shouldn't let one fortunate guess overshadow her ongoing challenges with proper English pronunciation. He continued his insidious campaign in the staff room later that day, subtly spreading rumors about Alara's unconventional methods. One must question the validity of such a spontaneous translation. Wouldn't you agree? Perhaps a pre-prepared phrasebook or a quick search on a smartphone. It's hardly the same as genuine linguistic mastery. He hinted that Alara might have used an online translator, desperately trying to reduce her extraordinary feat to a mere technological trick. He felt deeply threatened by her sudden, undeniable display of talent, seeing it as a direct threat to his carefully cultivated image of linguistic superiority. His fear and insecurity rapidly transformed into a more active malice. He began actively looking for ways to undermine her, to ensure her sudden, fleeting moment of recognition faded into obscurity. In class, he doubled down on Alara's pronunciation drills, assigning her increasingly challenging and obscure texts, hoping she would fail spectacularly and confirm his biased assessment of her abilities. He believed that by forcing her into situations where her broken accent would surely betray her, he could reassert his dominance and prove his initial judgment correct. He even started asking subtle, probing questions about her family background, her parents' professions, and the precise region they hailed from, driven by a nascent, chilling suspicion that she might be more than just a quiet, accented student. He was trying to find a weakness, a flaw, anything to dismantle the image of the unassuming girl who had dared to outshine him. He needed to reestablish his narrative of her inferiority. Alara, however, was no longer the shrinking violet. She sensed Mr. Harrison's renewed animosity, his thinly veiled attempts to discredit her. But the incident with Anya, the profound relief she had seen in the new student's eyes, and the quiet awe in Ms. Sharma's gaze had given her a new kind of strength. She no longer saw her accent as a flaw to be hidden, but as a bridge, a unique tool that allowed her to connect with others on a deeper level. The challenge Mr. Harrison posed was no longer just about passing a class. It was about validating her identity, about proving that true understanding transcended superficial rules. She accepted his extra assignments, not with dread, but with a quiet, burning resolve. She would show him. She would show them all. The game had truly begun. The air in the Northwood High Assembly Hall crackled with anticipation, a thick, almost suffocating silence hanging over the hundreds of assembled students, faculty, media, and the lone foreign dignitary on stage. The sudden illness of the scheduled translator had plunged the International Day event into chaos, threatening to derail not just the ambassador's urgent message, but also the school's carefully planned showcase. Mr. Harrison. his face a mottled mask of panic and dwindling pride, stood beside Principal Thompson, utterly at a loss. His eyes darted desperately around the room, landing finally, reluctantly, on Ilara Vance, seated quietly in the back row. The very girl he had mocked, the one whose broken accent he had so cruelly parodied, was now, impossibly, their only hope. Principal Thompson, his usual authoritative demeanor replaced by a strained urgency, stepped towards the microphone. He cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping across the anxious faces in the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice a little hoarse, "we are facing an unforeseen circumstance. Our esteemed guest, Ambassador Jin, from the illustrious nation of Eldoria, requires immediate translation, and unfortunately, our professional linguist is indisposed." He paused, a heavy silence descending. Then, with a subtle nod from Sharma, he continued, his voice gaining a flicker of renewed hope. "However, we believe we may have a solution. With all due respect to the ambassador and your valuable time, we ask for your patience. Ilara Vance, would you please join us on stage?" A collective murmur rippled through the hall. Heads turned. Whispers erupted. Ilara Vance. The quiet girl. The one Mr. Harrison mocked Mr. Harrison himself stiffened, a low, strangled sound escaping his throat. He wanted to object, to shout, to forbid it, but the words died on his tongue. The principal's desperate plea, backed by Ms. Sharma's unwavering gaze, left him no recourse. His fear of public failure overshadowed his ingrained prejudice, forcing him into a silent, agonizing surrender. Ilara felt every single eye in the vast hall pierce her. The spotlight, usually reserved for school plays and award ceremonies, seemed to find her even in the back row, pinning her in its harsh glare. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat that threatened to drown out all other sounds. Every fiber of her being screamed to run, to hide, to disappear. The memory of Mr. Harrison's sneering face, his mocking voice, resurfaced with vivid, agonizing clarity. She squeezed the small, carved wooden bird in her pocket until her knuckles ached, its symbols digging into her palm like a painful reassurance. Broken. Unique. Mangle. The words echoed. But then, a different voice, softer, older, resonated in her mind. Her grandmother's voice. The most powerful words are often those spoken when all others have failed. Listen to the wind, child. Listen to the forgotten tongues. And then, she saw Lynn, the new student she had helped in the cafeteria, seated a few rows ahead. Lynn looked back, offering a small, hopeful smile, a silent plea for connection. It wasn't about Mr. Harrison anymore. It was about bridging a gap, about helping. It was about proving, not to him, but to herself, the true strength that lay within her. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Ilara pushed herself up. Her legs felt like lead, but she forced one foot in front of the other. The walk to the stage felt like an odyssey, each step a deliberate act of defiance against the fear that threatened to paralyze her. The hushed whispers of the audience followed her, a wave of uncertainty and curiosity. She could feel Mr. Harrison's desperate, furious gaze burning into her back. He watched, a grim satisfaction flickering in his eyes when her first steps were hesitant, hoping against hope that she would falter, stumble, or simply freeze. She reached the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. Ambassador Jin, a figure of profound dignity, stood patiently beside the podium, a gentle, understanding smile on his face. He began to speak, his voice resonating with the complex, ancient cadences of his language, a tongue as rich and intricate as the tapestries of his homeland. His words flowed, a melodic stream of sounds, yet utterly incomprehensible to almost everyone in the room. He spoke of historical ties, of cultural exchange, of a vital peace initiative that depended on mutual understanding. Ilara took the microphone. Her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted it. She closed her eyes for a fleeting second, shutting out the glaring lights, the sea of expectant faces, and the oppressive weight of expectation. She concentrated, not on translating, but on listening. She let the ambassador's words wash over her, not as individual words, but as a symphony of sounds, rhythms, and subtle intonations. She felt the vibrations of his voice, tracing their patterns in her mind, connecting them to the intuitive linguistic sense she had nurtured in secret, the very same sense that drew her to the symbols on her wooden bird. It was as if she was no longer just hearing with her ears, but feeling with her entire being. She began to translate. Her initial words were hesitant, almost a murmur, still carrying a faint, familiar echo of her broken accent. A ripple of doubt went through the audience. A few skeptical murmurs broke the silence. Mr. Harrison's face, etched with fear moments before, now lit up with a flicker of smug satisfaction. I knew it, he thought, a cruel triumph in his eyes. She's fumbling. This is a fluke. She'll fail spectacularly. He was ready to interject, to declare the attempt futile. But then, something extraordinary happened. As Ilara continued, her voice grew stronger, clearer, rising in confidence and power. The faint, broken accent, once a mark of perceived imperfection, began to melt away, not into a generic American accent, but into a remarkable, utterly flawless rendition of the ambassador's intricate dialect. She wasn't just translating words, she was capturing the ambassador's precise intonation, his subtle pauses, the very essence of his diplomatic tone. She conveyed his earnestness, his subtle humor, his profound wisdom. It was as if the ambassador himself was speaking through her, a perfect conduit between two worlds. The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath. Their faces, moments ago etched with doubt, transformed into masks of sheer astonishment. Students leaned forward, captivated. Teachers, including Mr. Harrison's colleagues who had dismissed Ilara, watched in open-mouthed wonder. Ilara moved with the words, her hands occasionally gesturing, her eyes, now open, fixed on the ambassador, a silent, powerful connection forming between them. She was not just a translator, she was an interpreter, a living bridge, breathing life and nuance into every phrase. Ambassador Jin, who had listened intently to her translation, broke into a wide, radiant smile of profound relief and admiration. He looked directly at Ilara, his eyes shining with respect, and uttered a few sentences in his native tongue, his voice filled with warmth and genuine pleasure. Only Ilara understood. He says, Ilara translated, her voice clear and resonant, that my accent is not broken, but a testament to a spirit that embraces all languages. He says I speak not just with words, but with the soul of his people. The impact was immediate and overwhelming. The assembly hall erupted. A thunderous applause crashed through the space, echoing off the high ceilings, a resounding validation of Ilara's triumph. Students, teachers, administrators, and the gathered press were on their feet, cheering, whistling, clapping until their hands ached. Some wiped away tears, moved by the sheer unexpected beauty of the moment, the raw power of communication overcoming all barriers. It was a roar of collective admiration, a powerful affirmation that celebrated not just her skill, but her courage and resilience. Mr. Harrison stood frozen on the stage, a statue of utter disbelief and profound shame. His face was ash gray, his jaw slack. His eyes, once so full of disdain, were now wide with dawning horror, staring blankly at Ilara. The grand stage he had envisioned for his own triumph had become the very arena of his undoing. The broken accent he had mocked had just saved the school, rescued an international diplomatic crisis, and utterly shattered his carefully constructed facade of authority. The dramatic irony was a bitter, searing flame in his chest. His arrogant worldview, his prejudiced judgments, all crumbled to dust around him. He, the self-proclaimed custodian of clarity, was rendered speechless, exposed as utterly blind to true linguistic brilliance. He had dismissed a diamond as a mere pebble, and now that pebble had become a beacon, eclipsing him entirely. He wanted to disappear, to sink into the floorboards, to escape the crushing weight of his own hubris. But there was nowhere to hide from the resounding cheers, from the triumphant gaze of Ilara Vance, from the undeniable proof of his own profound mistake. Ilara, having finished the translation, handed the microphone back to Principal Thompson, a quiet, almost serene smile on her face. She looked at Mr. Harrison one last time. There was no triumph in her gaze, no gloating, only a quiet understanding of his utter defeat. She had not sought to destroy him, but merely to speak her truth, to prove her worth. Yet, in doing so, she had unwittingly dismantled his entire world. She stepped down from the podium, no longer the shy, self-conscious girl, but a young woman who had just found her voice, not just in language, but in life. The applause continued, a steady, rhythmic drumbeat of vindication. Her victory was not just personal. It was a powerful statement against prejudice, a testament to the fact that true talent often resides in the most unexpected places, nurtured by silent strength and an unwavering spirit. The thunderous applause eventually subsided, leaving a lingering hum of awe and astonishment in the Northwood High Assembly Hall. Ambassador Jin, his face still radiating a serene appreciation, approached Ilara. He extended a hand, his grip firm and respectful. "Young lady," he said in perfectly accented English, a surprising revelation to many. "Your linguistic gift is truly extraordinary. You are a bridge builder, a unifier. My nation owes you a great debt of gratitude." He then exchanged a few more rapid, intricate sentences with Ilara in his native tongue, a private moment of mutual respect, before turning to Principal Thompson. "Principal, this young woman is a prodigy. Her understanding goes beyond mere words. She grasps the very soul of the language. Such talent must be nurtured." His endorsement carried immense weight, far more than Mr. Harrison's bitter whispers ever could. Mr. Harrison, meanwhile, remained frozen, a monument to his own spectacular downfall. The applause, meant for Ilara, felt like 1,000 tiny hammers pounding on his skull. His carefully constructed world, built on the shifting sands of his own arrogance and prejudice, had crumbled in a single, eloquent moment. The students, once intimidated by his authority, now looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. The other teachers, who had silently endured his condescension, now saw him for what he truly was, a man consumed by his own petty insecurities. He was no longer the custodian of clarity, but a symbol of ignorance and bigotry. His internal thoughts were a maelstrom of shame and regret, a sickening realization that his own hubris had led him to this public, irreversible humiliation. He had lost everything: his authority, his respect, his very standing in the community he so desperately tried to control. Later that afternoon, the school administration convened a swift, decisive meeting. Principal Thompson, now emboldened by Ambassador Jin's direct praise, wasted no time. Mr. Harrison's long-standing pattern of discriminatory behavior, combined with the undeniable evidence of his malicious mockery, finally caught up to him. He was immediately stripped of his head of department title and placed on administrative leave pending a formal investigation. The omniscient narrator could see into Principal Thompson's thoughts. This has been brewing for too long. Ilara's talent, her quiet resilience, finally forced our hand. Mr. Harrison's bigotry was exposed, not by accusation, but by pure, undeniable talent. Within a week, facing mounting pressure from the school board and a burgeoning media scandal, Mr. Harrison was quietly encouraged into early retirement. His career, built on a foundation of pedantry and prejudice, was effectively over. He departed Northwood High, a ghost of his former self, leaving behind a school that collectively breathed a sigh of relief. In the days that followed, Alara found herself the unexpected center of attention. The shy, quiet girl who once ate lunch alone was now surrounded by classmates, eager to congratulate her, to ask her about languages, to simply be near her. The media, having caught wind of the dramatic turn of events, featured her prominently in local news segments, celebrating her as a local hero, a symbol of diversity and talent. But the most significant interaction came a few days after the International Day event, when Alara was packing up her books in the quiet solitude of the empty library. Mr. Harrison appeared in the doorway. He looked utterly broken. His shoulders slumped, his once immaculate suit wrinkled, his silver hair disheveled. The arrogance had been completely stripped away, leaving behind a raw, painful vulnerability. Alara tensed, bracing herself for another insult, another attempt to diminish her. He didn't speak immediately. He just stood there, his gaze fixed on the floor, his hands clasped nervously in front of him. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper, devoid of its usual condescending tone. "Alara," he began, his voice raspy. I came to apologize. Truly." He lifted his gaze, and Alara was struck by the raw remorse in his eyes. There was no pretense, no manipulation. He was genuinely ashamed. "I was wrong. About you. About everything." He took a hesitant step forward. "My prejudice, my own insecurities, they blinded me. I saw your accent as a flaw, when it was a gift, a bridge. I was foolish and cruel." He swallowed hard. "I tried to undermine you. I spread rumors. I assigned you those drills, hoping you would fail. I was afraid, Alara. Afraid that your quiet brilliance would expose my own inadequacies." His confession was a torrent of pent-up shame, a complete and utter surrender of his pride. He wasn't seeking forgiveness, just offering a raw, honest admission of his profound mistake. "I hope, one day, you can not forgive me, perhaps, but understand that I truly regret my actions." With that, he turned and left, his once imposing figure now seeming small and defeated. Alara watched him go, a strange mix of emotions swirling within her, not triumph, but a quiet, almost melancholic sense of closure. His apology, though belated, provided a painful but necessary release. The path ahead for Alara was now brilliantly clear. Ambassador Jin, deeply impressed by her talent, followed through on his promise. He offered her a prestigious internship at the Eldorian Embassy, an unprecedented opportunity for a high school student. This wasn't merely a clerical position. It was a chance to work directly with diplomatic linguists, to observe international relations firsthand, and to use her unique skills in a real-world setting. Simultaneously, Principal Thompson, with the backing of the school board and a generous endowment from an anonymous donor later revealed to be Ms. Sharma's philanthropic cousin, who had been deeply moved by Alara's story, offered Alara a full scholarship to any university of her choosing, with a strong recommendation for a top-tier linguistics program. These opportunities were not just financial, they were validation, a powerful affirmation of her worth, and a gateway to a future where her unique talents could flourish. Alara chose the embassy internship for her summer, eager to immerse herself in the world of international diplomacy. She spent her days translating sensitive documents, assisting in high-level meetings, and learning the intricate dance of cross-cultural communication. Her broken accent, once a source of shame, was now her greatest asset, allowing her to fluidly navigate conversations in multiple languages, seamlessly switching between registers and dialects. Her intuition for language, once a quiet hobby, transformed into a powerful tool, earning her the admiration of seasoned diplomats and linguists. They saw in her not just a translator, but a natural facilitator of understanding, a true linguistic prodigy. One late afternoon, as the sun began to cast long shadows across the library, Alara sat across from Ms. Sharma, sipping tea. The library was empty, save for the comforting scent of old books and their quiet conversation. "It feels different now," Alara confessed, her gaze thoughtful. "The noise is gone, but the quiet isn't the same. It's peaceful." Ms. Sharma smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Indeed, Alara, the quiet before the storm holds apprehension. The quiet after the storm holds peace. You faced the storm, and you emerged stronger. You proved them all wrong, not with anger, but with your truth." Alara traced the rim of her teacup. "I used to think my accent was a weakness, something to hide. Mr. Harrison made me feel that way. But now it feels like a part of me that I shouldn't have been ashamed of. It's who I am." "Precisely," Ms. Sharma affirmed, her voice gentle. "Your accent isn't broken, Alara. It's a symphony of your heritage, a testament to your ability to embrace multiple worlds. True strength isn't about conforming to one rigid standard, but about embracing your unique tapestry. You've not only mastered languages, you've mastered yourself." She paused, then added, "Your grandmother would be incredibly proud." Ilara's eyes welled up slightly at the mention of her grandmother, a quiet warmth spreading through her chest. Ms. Sharma's unwavering belief had been a beacon in her darkest hours. Alara realized that her true victory wasn't just in silencing Mr. Harrison or gaining new opportunities. It was in reclaiming her identity, in understanding that her broken accent was, in fact, a symbol of her rich, diverse heritage. She understood now that strength came not from erasing who she was, but from embracing every facet of her being, even the ones others tried to diminish. The old wounds still lingered, but they no longer bled. They had become scars, reminders of a battle fought and won, transforming her from a timid observer into a confident participant in the grand tapestry of the world. The resolution was complete. A new calm had settled over Alara Vance's life. A calm born not of avoidance, but of profound self-acceptance and well-deserved triumph. The quiet girl had found her voice, and it was a voice that would resonate far beyond the walls of Northwood High. 5 years later, the once familiar hallways of Northwood High School felt like a distant echo in Alara Vance's memory. The scent of stale cafeteria food and disinfectant had been replaced by the crisp, clean air of international conference rooms, the faint aroma of exotic spices from diplomatic dinners, and the rich, earthy scent of ancient manuscripts. Alara was no longer the quiet, shy student shrinking in the back row. She was a poised, confident woman, a highly respected young diplomat within the Eldorian Foreign Service, and a celebrated multilingual scholar whose unique linguistic intuition was sought after across the globe. Her days were a whirlwind of activity, a vibrant tapestry woven with the threads of international relations. She effortlessly navigated high-stakes negotiations, her voice a seamless conduit between heads of state speaking disparate tongues. One moment, she might be mediating a delicate cultural exchange between two historically estranged nations, her empathetic understanding of their nuances bridging generations of misunderstanding. The next, she could be advising on a complex trade agreement, ensuring every clause was perfectly rendered in multiple languages, leaving no room for ambiguity. Her accent, once the target of Mr. Harrison's ridicule, was now celebrated as a testament to her profound global perspective, a living embodiment of her ability to transcend borders and connect cultures. She moved with an innate grace, her gestures precise, her eyes, still deep and observant, now sparkled with a profound sense of purpose. Alara remembered the quiet strength of Ms. Anya Sharma, the librarian who had first seen her true potential, true to her word. Alara never forgot those who had believed in her. using a significant portion of the scholarship funds she had received and her growing influence. Alara established the Whispers of the Wind Scholarship Fund. This foundation was dedicated to providing full scholarships and mentorship opportunities for underprivileged immigrant students who faced similar linguistic or cultural challenges to her own. She firmly believed that every accent, every heritage, held a unique power, a hidden language waiting to be unveiled. Every quarter, Alara personally led workshops for the scholarship recipients. She taught them not just about grammar or vocabulary, but about confidence, about embracing their heritage, and about finding their own unique voice. "Your accent is not a flaw," she would tell them, her voice clear and resonant, devoid of any lingering self-consciousness. "It is a badge of honor, a symphony of the many places and cultures that have shaped you. It makes you unique. It makes you powerful." She would share anecdotes of her own journey, of the struggles and triumphs, inspiring hope in the young, often timid faces looking up at her. She often brought her small, intricately carved wooden bird to these workshops, letting the students touch its smooth surface, encouraging them to find their own symbolic anchors. The bird, now resting on her polished desk at the embassy, was a constant, silent reminder of her roots and the extraordinary journey that transformed her broken accent into a powerful voice for global change. Her work went beyond the linguistic. She championed cultural exchange programs, believing that true diplomacy began with understanding people, not just words. She helped facilitate sister city initiatives between American towns and communities in traditionally underserved regions of the world, fostering genuine connections at a grassroots level. Her impact was profound, tangible, and far-reaching. One sunny afternoon, Alara returned to Northwood High School. The old building looked much the same, yet the atmosphere within felt lighter, more welcoming. She walked into the library, the familiar scent of old books washing over her. Ms. Sharma, now with a few more silver streaks in her hair, looked up from her desk, her eyes lighting up with genuine delight. "Alara, it's wonderful to see you," Ms. Sharma exclaimed, rising to hug her. "It's good to be back, Ms. Sharma," Alara replied, her smile warm. They spent an hour talking, reminiscing about the old days, about Mr. Harrison's downfall, and about Alara's incredible journey. Ms. Sharma spoke with immense pride about the scholarship fund, about the students whose lives Alara was transforming. "You've not just built bridges between languages, Alara," Ms. Sharma said, her voice filled with emotion. "You've built bridges between hearts." Alara thought about her parents. They lived a peaceful, comfortable life now, free from the anxieties of her youth. They often visited her in the city, their faces beaming with pride as they watched her navigate the complex world she now inhabited. They saw the confident, compassionate woman she had become, and they knew their struggles had not been in vain. Their daughter, the quiet girl who once felt invisible, had become a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of resilience and self-acceptance. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow through the library windows, Alara excused herself. She wanted to visit one last place. She walked slowly through the school grounds, past the athletic fields and the science labs, until she reached the assembly hall. The imposing doors stood open, beckoning her inside. She stepped in, and the vast, empty space seemed to echo with the ghosts of the past. She walked onto the stage, stood exactly where she had stood all those years ago, trembling, humiliated, then triumphing. She closed her eyes, not to hide, but to truly feel the echoes of that day. She heard Mr. Harrison's sneer, felt the burn of shame, then the sudden, electrifying surge of clarity, the ambassador's melodious voice, and finally, the roaring applause that had swept away the shadows. When she opened her eyes, the hall was still empty, but it no longer felt like an arena of judgment. It felt like a temple of transformation. Alara smiled, a profound sense of peace settling over her. She knew, without a doubt, that her purpose extended far beyond personal triumph. It was about creating a world where no one felt broken, where every voice, every accent, every language was not just heard, but celebrated. She reached into her pocket, tracing the symbols on her wooden bird. It had been her silent companion, a tangible link to her past, a reminder of the forgotten tongues that had, in fact, become the key to her future. She looked out at the empty seats, imagining the faces of countless future students, some perhaps shy, some perhaps struggling with their own accents, their own hidden talents. She knew her journey was far from over. The world was vast, filled with countless languages waiting to be understood, countless cultures waiting to be connected. And Alara Vance, the girl who had turned her supposed weakness into her greatest strength, was ready to continue building those bridges, one word, one understanding, one shared smile at a time. The world was her oyster, and she, a vibrant, compassionate bridge between its many languages and cultures, was ready for the next spring and the one after that, each bringing new blossoms of connection and understanding. This concludes the story. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies, and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment below. Share this story with those who need inspiration, or with anyone who understands the power of a voice that refuses to be silenced. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories that celebrate resilience, empathy, and the extraordinary in the everyday.